The sky above the Vecthory throne world burned orange and purple as the sun began to set behind the crystal towers of the capital city. And somewhere high above the clouds, a single human dropship cut through the atmosphere like a tiny metal seed falling from the heavens. The Vecthory had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. And in all that time, no species had ever dared to challenge them in such a strange way. They had conquered 200 star systems, enslaved dozens of alien races, and built an empire that stretched across countless light years of space. And now, a single human ship was descending toward their most sacred city high. Hegemon Vorthak stood on the observation platform of his palace. His 12-foot serpentine body coiled beneath him as he watched the small vessel approach. His scales were the color of deep emeralds, decorated with golden rings that marked his status as the supreme ruler of all Vectheria. Around him stood the members of his high council, each one a powerful lord or general in their own right. And every single one of them was laughing. "Is this some kind of joke?" asked General Sithrak, his forked tongue flicking out in amusement. "The humans send one ship to face the mightiest empire in the galaxy. Perhaps they have lost their minds," suggested Lord Venmore, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel humor. "The destruction of their little colony must have broken their spirits completely." The hegemon said nothing, but a thin smile crossed his reptilian face as he watched the dropship land in the plaza below. Smoke hissed from its engines as it settled onto the polished stone. And for a long moment, nothing happened. Then the hatch opened, and a single figure stepped out. He was small by Vecthory standards, barely 6 feet tall, with soft pink skin and no scales or claws or natural weapons of any kind. He wore simple gray armor that looked primitive compared to the gleaming energy shields of the Vecthory guards. And he carried a rifle across his back that seemed almost like a toy. This was Sergeant Marcus Cole of the United Earth Defense Force, and he was humanity's only representative on this alien world. The hegemon slithered down from his observation platform, followed by his council and 100 armed guards. They surrounded the human in a circle of scales and weapons, towering over him like giants looking down at an insect. "Look who is here to conquer us," the hegemon said, and his voice echoed across the plaza as his translator device converted his hissing speech into words the human could understand. The council erupted in laughter once again, their hissing voices filling the air like a chorus of mocking snakes. Guards stamped their weapons on the ground in amusement, and even the servants watching from the windows above covered their mouths to hide their smiles. Marcus Cole did not move. He stood perfectly still in the center of all that mockery, his face showing no emotion at all. "I am not here to conquer you," he said, and his voice was calm and steady despite being surrounded by enemies. "I am here to give you one chance to surrender." The laughter stopped for just a moment as the aliens processed what they had heard, and then it returned even louder than before. The hegemon threw back his head and let out a long hissing howl of amusement, his golden decorations jingling as his body shook. "Surrender?" he repeated, leaning down until his face was just inches from the humans. "You stand alone before an empire of billions, little creature. You have no fleet, no army, nothing but that pathetic weapon on your back. And you ask us to surrender?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. The hegemon's amusement faded slightly, replaced by something that might have been curiosity. This human was either completely insane or completely stupid, and he could not decide which. "Tell me, small thing," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Marcus could hear. "Do you truly believe you can threaten us? Do you think your primitive species stands any chance against the Vecthory Dominion?" Marcus looked up at the massive alien without fear. "I think you made a mistake 3 years ago on New Helsinki. I think that mistake is going to cost you everything. And I think you are too arrogant to realize it until it is too late." The mention of New Helsinki made the hegemon's eyes narrow. That had been a small human colony, nothing important. Just 40,000 civilians on a backwater world. The Vecturi had conquered it easily, crushing their pathetic resistance in a matter of months. But it had not been as easy as it should have been. Hegemon pushed that thought away and straightened to his full height. You are brave, little human. I will give you that much. But bravery without power is just stupidity. He raised one clawed hand and gestured to his guards. Seize this creature, he commanded. We will take him to our laboratories and learn everything there is to know about human biology. Perhaps we will find out why they believe themselves worthy of our attention. The guards moved forward, their weapons raised and ready. Marcus did not run or fight or beg. He simply raised his left arm and pressed a small button on the device strapped to his wrist. Acknowledged, a voice said in his earpiece, so quiet that only he could hear it. Consequence protocol initiated. The guards grabbed his arms and forced him to his knees, but Marcus did not resist. He just looked up at the hegemon with something that might have been pity in his eyes. I gave you a chance, he said softly. Remember that. When everything you have built comes crashing down around you, remember that I stood here and gave you a chance to avoid it. The hegemon felt a strange chill run down his spine, but he ignored it. This was just one human, one insignificant creature from a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. What could one human possibly do against an empire? He turned away and began slithering back toward his palace, dismissing the prisoner from his mind. There were more important matters to attend to. Treaties to negotiate and wars to plan, and an empire to rule behind him. The guards dragged Marcus Cole away toward the detention facility, and the sun continued to set over the crystal towers of the capital city. None of them knew that across the Vecturi Dominion, across all 200 of their conquered worlds, human operatives were receiving the same signal that Marcus had just sent. None of them knew that the countdown had begun, and none of them knew that in trying to humiliate one human soldier, they had just sealed the fate of their entire civilization. The hegemon entered his throne room and settled onto his couch of silk and gold, surrounded by servants who brought him food and drink. He thought about the strange human and his ridiculous demands, and he laughed to himself. Surrender. As if the mightiest empire in the galaxy would ever surrender to a species of soft-skinned primitives who could not even protect one tiny colony. He would enjoy dissecting that human, learning what made his species tick. Perhaps he would keep the skull as a trophy, a reminder of the day humanity tried to threaten the Vecturi and failed outside the palace windows. The last light of the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, beyond those distant points of light, Earth was waiting, and Earth was patient. Earth had been preparing for this moment for 3 long years. Ever since the day the Vecturi burned New Helsinki and killed 40,000 innocent people. Every death had been recorded, every name had been remembered, and every single one would be answered. The hegemon did not know it yet, but the mocking laughter of his court would soon turn to screams of terror, because humanity had not sent one soldier to conquer them. Humanity had sent one soldier to warn them, and they had chosen not to listen. 3 years before Marcus Cole stood in that alien plaza, the colony of New Helsinki had been a peaceful place. It was a small world on the edge of human space, home to farmers and miners and families who had left Earth to build a new life among the stars. The children there played in green fields under a yellow sun, and the adults worked hard to turn their little colony into something beautiful. They had no army, no warships, nothing but hope and determination and the simple dream of a better future. Then the Vecturi came. Their fleet appeared in orbit without warning, blocking out the sun with the shadows of 100 massive warships. Their demands were simple: surrender immediately and become slaves of the Dominion, or die. The governor of New Helsinki was a woman named Sarah Chun, and she faced an impossible choice. Her people had no weapons capable of fighting the alien fleet, no way to call for help from Earth, and no chance of survival. If they resisted, she surrendered. But the Vectri did not accept peaceful submission. They wanted to make an example, to show the galaxy what happened to species who dared to expand into their territory. They began rounding up colonists and shipping them off to labor camps, separating families and treating humans like animals. And that was when something unexpected happened. Humans started fighting back. It began with small acts of resistance. A farmer who refused to give up his land, a teacher who hid children from the alien soldiers, a mechanic who sabotaged equipment in the night. The Vectri punished these rebels harshly, executing them in public to discourage others. But the resistance only grew stronger. General Kritax was assigned to pacify New Helsinki, and he expected the task to take no more than a few weeks. He had conquered dozens of worlds before, broken the spirits of species far more dangerous than these soft, little humans. He was wrong. The humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They did not surrender when they were outnumbered, did not retreat when they were outgunned, did not give up when all hope seemed lost. A squad of Vectri soldiers would enter a building to arrest suspected rebels, and the building would explode around them. A human farmer would detonate bombs hidden in his own home, killing himself and a dozen alien soldiers at the same time. Kritax had never seen anything like it. What kind of creature destroyed itself just to harm its enemies? The answer, he learned, was humans. A pilot named James Wong flew his damaged shuttle directly into the engine core of a Vectri carrier, killing himself instantly, but taking 2,000 alien soldiers with him. He could have ejected, could have survived, but he chose to die if it meant hurting the enemy. A group of teenagers organized a spy network in the sewers beneath the capital city, carrying messages and stealing supplies right under the noses of the occupation force. When they were finally caught, not one of them gave up the names of their fellow rebels. Even under torture, a doctor named Aisha Patel refused to treat wounded Vectri soldiers, knowing that her refusal would mean her own death. She looked her executioners in the eye and told them that she would rather die than help those who had murdered her patients over and over again. The humans chose death over submission. They fought with farming tools and kitchen knives and bare hands when they had no weapons. They turned every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. Kritax brought in more troops, more weapons, more ships. He burned fields and demolished buildings and executed prisoners by the hundreds. He did everything that had always worked against other species. Nothing worked against the humans. The resistance only grew more determined, more creative, more ruthless. Children as young as 10 years old carried bombs hidden in their school bags. Old men and women poisoned the food supplies of alien soldiers. Factory workers built weapons in secret and distributed them through underground networks. One human woman, a librarian named Elena Vasquez, walked into a Vectri command center with explosives strapped to her body. She smiled at the guards as she approached, and then she detonated herself, killing the entire command staff and setting back the occupation by months. When they searched her belongings, they found a note addressed to her daughter. "I'm sorry, I cannot watch you grow up, but I would rather die free than live as a slave." Never stop fighting. These were not soldiers. These were teachers and farmers and shopkeepers and children. They had no military training, no advanced weapons, no hope of victory, and yet they would not stop. General Kritax sent increasingly desperate reports back to the hegemon. He requested more troops, more resources, more authority to use extreme measures. The conquest of New Helsinki was supposed to be a simple task, but it was turning into a nightmare. It took the Vectri 18 months to fully pacify the colony, and it cost them over 50,000 soldiers. 50,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors, killed by 40,000 civilians who refused to accept defeat when the fighting finally ended. Krithax ordered his intelligence officers to study the humans and explain what had made them so different from every other species. The Dominion had conquered. Their report was only a few pages long, but it contained a conclusion that would haunt the Vecthory for years to come. This species does not calculate survival the way others do. They value abstract concepts like freedom and honor and revenge more than their own lives. They are broken, or they are something else entirely. We recommend extreme caution in all future dealings with humanity. The hegemon read the report and dismissed it as the excuses of a failed general. Krithax was reassigned to a remote outpost in disgrace, and New Helsinki was declared a successful conquest. But some of the smarter Vecthory remembered the report and wondered what it meant when Earth received news of what had happened to their colony. They sent a single message to the Vecthory Dominion: release our people, or face the consequences. The hegemon laughed at this threat, just as he would laugh 3 years later when Marcus Cole stood before him. What could one small species do against an empire of 200 worlds? He sent back his response: submit to the Dominion or share the fate of New Helsinki. Earth said nothing more. The humans went quiet, and the Vecthory assumed they had accepted their place in the galaxy. They were wrong for 3 years. Humanity had been preparing, not building fleets or armies, but doing something far more subtle and far more dangerous. They had been infiltrating. Human traders appeared in Vecthory ports, offering exotic goods from distant worlds. Human engineers signed contracts to maintain alien equipment. Human workers took jobs in alien factories and power plants and communication centers. The Vecthory barely noticed. Humans were weak and harmless, after all, good for nothing but manual labor. They were happy to let these primitive creatures do the boring work that Vecthory citizens considered. Beneath them, they did not realize that every human who entered their territory was carrying something far more dangerous than weapons. They were carrying patience. They were carrying determination. They were carrying the memory of 40,000 dead colonists who had refused to surrender. And they were carrying a plan by the time Marcus Cole landed on the throne world. There were human operatives on every single world in the Vecthory Dominion. They worked in power plants and water treatment facilities and communication hubs and military bases. They knew every weakness, every vulnerability, every way to bring the alien civilization to its knees. All they needed was the signal that Marcus Cole had just sent. The Vecthory thought they were dealing with a conquered species, broken and harmless. They thought the lesson of New Helsinki had taught humanity to fear them. They did not understand that New Helsinki had taught humanity something very different. It had taught them exactly how to destroy an empire. The detention cell was cold and dark, built from black metal that seemed to absorb all light and warmth. Marcus Cole sat on the hard floor with his back against the wall, his hands bound behind him with energy shackles that hummed with alien power. He had been here for 6 hours. Waiting, the Vecthory guards had taken his armor and his weapons and his communication device, leaving him with nothing but his gray uniform and his thoughts. They had not been gentle, but Marcus had endured far worse during his training. He was not afraid. Fear was a luxury he could not afford. The cell door slid open with a hiss, and the hegemon himself slithered inside. His massive body barely fit through the entrance, and his golden decorations scraped against the walls as he moved. "Leave us," he commanded the guards. And they obeyed without question. The door closed, and Marcus was alone with the most powerful being in 200 star systems. "You interest me, Ewan," the hegemon said, coiling his body into a comfortable position on the floor. "Most prisoners beg or cry or threaten. You have done none of these things. You just sit there, waiting, as if you know something I do not." Marcus looked up at the alien ruler with calm eyes. "I do know something you do not. And what is that?" "I know how this ends." The hegemon let out a soft hiss of amusement. "Enlighten me." Marcus shifted his position, wincing slightly as the shackles dug into his wrists. Before I do, let me ask you a question. Why did you come here yourself? You are the supreme ruler of an empire. You have servants and generals and countless underlings who could interrogate a prisoner. Why come in person? The hegemon was silent for a moment, considering the question. Because I want to understand. 3 years ago, we conquered one of your colonies. It should have been simple, but it was not. Your people fought in ways we had never seen before. They died rather than surrender, destroyed themselves rather than submit. He leaned closer, his reptilian eyes studying the human with intense curiosity. I have conquered many species, human. I have broken the wills of creatures far stronger and smarter and more dangerous than you. But none of them fought like your people did on New Helsinki. You want to know why? Marcus said. Yes. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he began to speak. My grandmother was born on Earth, in a place called Warsaw. When she was just a child, her country was invaded by a powerful enemy. They had more soldiers, more weapons, more everything. By all logic, her people should have surrendered. He looked up at the hegemon. They did not surrender. They fought for 5 years against impossible odds. They fought in the streets and the forests and the rubble of their cities. Millions of them died, but they never stopped fighting. Your species is insane, the hegemon said, but there was something like respect in his voice. No, Marcus replied. We are human. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats when we did not know what was on the other side. We are the species that climbed mountains and explored deserts and walked on our own moon. We do not stop when things are difficult. We do not give up when we are afraid. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on the alien ruler. You made a mistake on New Helsinki. You thought you were teaching us a lesson about your power. Instead, you taught us a lesson about yours. What lesson? You taught us that you can be beaten. You showed us every weakness in your technology, every flaw in your tactics, every vulnerability in your empire. And you proved something far more important. What is that? You proved that your people break. Your soldiers retreat when they are outnumbered. Your civilians surrender when they are threatened. Your empire runs on fear and submission and the assumption that everyone will eventually give up. Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We do not give up. We do not break. And right now, across your entire dominion, there are thousands of humans who have spent the last 3 years learning exactly how to bring everything you have built crashing down. The hegemon's eyes narrowed. You are bluffing, am I? Marcus asked. Tell me, hegemon, who maintains the plasma reactors on your forge world of Vector 7? Who operates the communication relays on the edge of your territory? Who works in the water treatment plants and power stations and food processing centers on 100 different worlds? He let the questions hang in the air. Humans, he continued. Thousands of them. You never noticed because you never thought we were a threat. We are small and weak and harmless, good only for manual labor. So you let us into every corner of your empire without a second thought. The hegemon's body tensed, his scales rippling with sudden tension. You would not dare. I already have, Marcus said. 6 hours ago, when your guards brought me to this cell, I sent a signal. That signal has been relayed across your entire dominion. Every human operative has received their orders and is now in position. He stood up slowly, the shackles still binding his hands. You have 1 hour to begin negotiations for the release of the New Helsinki, survivors and the recognition of human territory. If you do not, my people will begin Phase 1. Phase 1? A demonstration. A small taste of what we can do. Nothing that cannot be repaired. Nothing that will kill too many of your people. Just enough to show you that I am not bluffing. The hegemon rose to his full height, towering over the human prisoner. You think a few saboteurs can threaten an empire of billions? I think you do not understand what you are dealing with, Marcus replied. Your empire is a machine, Hegemon. A vast, complex machine that requires constant maintenance and supervision to function. Your people have grown soft and lazy. Depending on technology they do not fully understand. He stepped closer to the massive alien, showing no fear. My people have spent 3 years becoming the hands that maintain that machine. We know every circuit, every valve, every weakness. And we are willing to do things your people would never consider. What things? Whatever is necessary, Marcus said. The woman who manages your primary communication relay on Vector 3? She has a dead man switch connected to the main power coupling. If anything happens to her, the entire relay goes dark. The engineer who maintains the cooling system on your flagship's main reactor? He knows exactly how to cause a containment breach. The Hegemon's face was impossible to read, but Marcus could see the tension in his coiled body. You would kill yourselves just to harm us? We would die to the last human if it meant making you pay for what you did to our people, Marcus said. That is what you learned on New Helsinki, but you refused to believe it. You thought it was weakness or insanity. It is neither. He looked up at the alien ruler with eyes that held no mercy. It is what we are. We are the species that remembers. We are the species that never forgives. And we are the species that will burn down the entire galaxy if that is what it takes to protect our own. The Hegemon was silent for a long time, processing everything he had heard. Then he turned toward the door. You have 1 hour, he said. If your demands are not met, we will see what your people can really do. The door opened, and he slithered out into the corridor. Marcus watched him go, then sank back down to the floor. His heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm and controlled. The next hour would determine the fate of 2 civilizations. He closed his eyes and thought about Earth, about the billions of people counting on him to bring their family members home. He thought about the survivors of New Helsinki, still suffering in alien labor camps. He thought about all the humans scattered across the Vectory Dominion, waiting for his signal. He thought about what would happen if the Hegemon refused, and he prayed that the alien would make the right choice. The hour passed slowly in the cold darkness of the cell, and Marcus counted every minute in his head. He had trained for this moment, prepared for every possible outcome. But nothing could truly prepare a person for the weight of so many lives hanging in the balance when the cell door finally opened. It was not the Hegemon who entered, but a squad of heavily armed guards. They grabbed Marcus roughly and dragged him out into the corridor, their clawed hands digging into his arms. Where are we going? He asked, but they did not answer. They brought him to the throne room, a vast chamber of crystal and gold where the Hegemon sat coiled upon his throne. Around him stood the entire High Council, their faces twisted with anger and contempt. Marcus was thrown to the floor at the base of the throne, and he looked up to see the Hegemon staring down at him with cold reptilian eyes. Your hour is up, human, the Hegemon said. I have consulted with my council, and we have reached a decision. He gestured to a guard standing nearby, who stepped forward, holding a long blade of crackling energy. We do not negotiate with insects. We crush them, and we will make an example of you that will echo across the galaxy. Marcus felt his heart sink, but he kept his voice steady. You are making a mistake. The only mistake was allowing your species to exist this long, the Hegemon replied. After we are done with you, we will send our fleets to Earth. We will burn your cities and enslave your people and wipe your pathetic civilization from the stars. He raised his hand to give the order. Last chance, Marcus said. The Hegemon hesitated for just a moment, something flickering in his eyes. Then he brought his hand down. Kill him. The guard raised the energy blade, its light casting harsh shadows across Marcus's face. He closed his eyes and thought of home, of the blue skies and green hills of Earth. of everyone he was leaving behind. Then his earpiece crackled to life. Phase 1 initiated, a voice said. Beginning demonstration. Across the Vectory Dominion. Thousands of human operatives received the same signal and began to act in the Forge world of Vector 7. A human engineer named David Park walked calmly to the control room of the main plasma foundry. He had worked there for 2 years, maintaining the systems that powered the entire planet's industrial output. And no one looked twice as he entered. He sat down at his console, typed in a sequence of commands, and disabled the containment field on the primary reactor. The explosion was visible from space. A pillar of fire erupted from the surface of the planet, consuming the foundry and everything within 5 kilometers. The entire industrial output of Vector 7 was gone in an instant. And with it, the production capacity for half of the Dominion's military equipment. David Park died in the blast. But he died smiling on the agricultural moon of Sithis. A human woman named Maria Santos had spent 18 months working in the Central Food Distribution Center. She was quiet and hardworking, and her supervisors had never suspected anything. Now she walked through the massive grain silos, spraying a fine mist from a container hidden in her uniform. The substance was harmless to humans, but would render the grain toxic to Vectory biology within days. The entire food supply of 6 Vectory worlds would be unusable. Millions would face starvation unless emergency shipments could be arranged. Maria slipped out of the facility and disappeared into the night. Her mission was complete on a dozen communication relay stations scattered across the Dominion. Human technicians introduced subtle errors into the translation protocols. Messages would be delayed, distorted, or lost entirely. The coordination that held the Empire together began to unravel on military bases. Human janitors and maintenance workers sabotaged weapons and vehicles. On space stations, human engineers caused accidents that required evacuation. On transport ships, human crew members disabled navigation systems and life support, and on the throne world itself. Every light in the capital city suddenly went dark. The hegemon's throne room was plunged into blackness as the power grid failed. Emergency generators hummed to life, casting red shadows across the terrified faces of the council members. What is happening? The hegemon roared, his voice echoing through the darkness. Marcus opened his eyes and looked up at the chaos around him. The guard who had been about to execute him was frozen in confusion, the energy blade flickering as the power fluctuated. That was Phase 1, Marcus said, his voice calm despite everything. That was a demonstration. We targeted infrastructure, not people. We caused damage that can be repaired, disruption that can be recovered from. He struggled to his feet, the shackles still binding his hands. But make no mistake, Hegemon. If you kill me, if you refuse to negotiate, my people will move to Phase 2. What is Phase 2? The Hegemon demanded. Everything you just experienced, but permanent, Marcus replied. We will not just disable your power grids. We will destroy them. We will not just contaminate your food supplies. We will poison your water. We will not just disrupt your communications. We will sever them completely. He stepped forward, and even in the flickering red light, his eyes burned with determination. Your people will starve in the dark, unable to call for help, unable to coordinate a response. Your empire will collapse from within, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. The Hegemon's council began to murmur among themselves, fear spreading through their ranks. They had never faced an enemy like this, never imagined that a single species could threaten them in such a way. You are monsters, one of the council members hissed. We are survivors, Marcus replied. Your people killed 40,000 of our civilians on New Helsinki. You thought that would make us afraid. Instead, it made us determined. It made us patient. It made us willing to do whatever is necessary. He looked around at the assembled aliens, seeing the fear in their eyes. I am not a monster. I am a messenger. And my message is simple. The cost of fighting humanity is higher than any victory could possibly be worth. The hegemon was silent for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities and outcomes. He had ruled this empire for 200 years, had conquered countless worlds and broken countless enemies, but he had never faced a situation like this. "What do you want?" He finally asked. "I told you at the beginning," Marcus said. "Release the survivors of New Helsinki. Recognize human territory as sovereign. Withdraw all Vectory forces from our space, and we will disappear like we were never here. And if we refuse, then your empire dies," Marcus said simply. "Not today, not tomorrow, but slowly, painfully, inevitably. You cannot find all of us. You cannot stop all of us. And we will never, ever stop." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "This contains the full terms of our proposal. They are fair. They ask for nothing but the return of what you took from us, and the guarantee that you will not take anything else." He held out the chip toward the hegemon. "Take it, read it, discuss it with your council. You have until dawn to decide." The hegemon stared at the tiny chip in the human's hand. This insignificant piece of technology that represented the fate of his entire civilization. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached out and took it. "Get him out of my sight," he commanded. The guards grabbed Marcus and dragged him back toward the cell, but this time their grip was not quite so rough. They had seen the lights go out and felt the ground shake when the distant explosions reached the throne world. They were beginning to understand that this small, soft creature was far more dangerous than he appeared. As they threw him back into his cell, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The demonstration had worked exactly as planned. And now the hegemon had to make a choice. He could continue to fight and watch his empire crumble around him, or he could accept humanity's terms and preserve what remained of his power. Marcus knew which choice the alien would make. Creatures like the hegemon valued their own survival above everything else, and that was the difference between them. That was why humanity would always win. The sun rose over the crystal towers of the Vectory capital, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a beautiful morning, the kind that poets wrote about. But there was no joy in the hearts of the Vectory people. Their world had changed overnight, and nothing would ever be the same in the great hall of the palace. The treaty was signed before witnesses from a dozen alien civilizations. The hegemon's hand trembled slightly as he pressed his seal to the document, but his face remained carefully blank. Marcus Cole stood on the other side of the table, dressed in a clean uniform that had been provided by nervous Vectory servants. He looked tired but calm, like a man who had finished a long and difficult journey. The terms were simple. All survivors from New Helsinki would be returned to human space within 30 days. The Vectory Dominion would recognize all human territory as sovereign and would not enter it without permission. All Vectory military forces would withdraw from the border regions immediately. In exchange, humanity would recall all of its operatives and restore all damaged systems to working order. The sleeper cells would dissolve, the saboteurs would disappear, and the Dominion would be left intact. It was a fair deal, perhaps even generous. Many in the Vectory Council had expected the humans to demand far more, but Marcus knew that revenge was not the goal. The goal was safety, security, the guarantee that what happened to New Helsinki would never happen again. The signing ceremony took less than an hour, and then it was done. The war that had never officially been declared was officially over. Marcus shook hands with the hegemon, a gesture that clearly confused the alien ruler. "I hope we never have to meet again," Marcus said. "As do I," the hegemon replied, and for the first time, there was something like respect in his voice. The human delegation departed on the same dropship that had brought Marcus to the throne world. As it lifted off and climbed toward the stars, Marcus looked down at the crystal city one last time. thought about all the humans who had given their lives to make this moment possible. David Park and his sacrifice on Vector 7. Maria Santos and her quiet mission on Sithis. The thousands of others who had worked and planned and waited for 3 long years. They were heroes. All of them, even if the galaxy would never know their names. The journey back to Earth took several weeks, and Marcus spent most of it sleeping. He had not realized how exhausted he was until the tension finally faded. And then he could barely keep his eyes open when the ship finally entered Earth's atmosphere. He looked out the window and felt tears streaming down his face. The blue oceans and green continents had never looked so beautiful. He was home. The celebrations lasted for days. The return of the new Helsinki survivors was broadcast on every screen, on every human world, and people wept with joy as families were reunited. Marcus was hailed as a hero, offered medals and honors and positions of power. He refused them all. "I am just a messenger," he told the journalists who crowded around him. The real heroes are the ones who did not come home. 6 months later, the galaxy was still processing what had happened. The news of humanity's victory had spread to every corner of known space, and other civilizations were watching closely in the palace of the crystalline hegemony. Advisors gathered to discuss the implications. "These humans are dangerous," one of them said. "We should strike now, before they grow stronger. Did you not learn from the victory?" Another replied, "The humans do not fight the way we expect. They do not think the way we think. Attacking them would be foolish." The debate continued, but no action was taken. The hegemony decided to observe and wait in the council chambers of the Mordock Consortium. Similar conversations were happening. "We must understand their psychology," the High Consul declared. "We must learn what makes them so different from other species." They sent researchers and diplomats to human space, hoping to uncover the secrets of humanity's unique resilience. They found only ordinary people living ordinary lives, laughing and loving and working and dreaming. There was nothing special about them, the researchers reported. They are weak and short-lived and fragile. By all measures, they should be easy to conquer. And yet the victory failed, the High Consul said. "There must be something we are missing." There was, but it was not something that could be measured or studied. It was something that lived in the hearts of every human, passed down through generations of struggle and survival. It was hope. It was stubbornness. It was the absolute refusal to accept defeat in his private chambers on the throne world. The hegemon spent long hours staring at intelligence reports and trying to understand what had happened to his empire. He had ruled for 200 years, had conquered countless worlds, had been the most powerful being in the galaxy, and he had been humbled by a single human standing alone in his throne room. An advisor entered, bowing low. "Hegemon, the Mordock are requesting information about human psychology. They wish to understand how to avoid our mistake." The hegemon was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on the stars beyond his window. Finally, he spoke. "Tell them the truth. Tell them that humans do not conquer worlds. They do not need to. They simply make you realize that the cost of fighting them is higher than any victory is worth." The advisor hesitated. "Is there anything else?" "Yes," the hegemon said. "Tell them that if they value their civilization, they should make friends with the humans, not enemies. Tell them that we learned this lesson the hard way, and we do not recommend repeating our mistake." The advisor bowed again and departed. Leaving the hegemon alone with his thoughts on Earth, life continued as it always had. Children went to school, and workers went to their jobs, and families gathered for meals. The galaxy had changed, but daily life remained much the same. Marcus Cole sat in a quiet bar near his hometown, drinking a beer and watching the news on a screen above the counter. Footage of the treaty signing played on a loop, interspersed with interviews and analysis. A stranger sat down on the stool beside him, a young woman with curious eyes. "You are him, are you not?" The one they sent to the Vectory? Marcus shrugged. I just delivered a message. What message? He finished his drink and set down the glass. Then he stood and pulled on his jacket, preparing to leave. That we are not the species you want as an enemy, he said. But we are exactly the species you want as a friend. The woman watched him walk toward the door. Where are you going now? Marcus paused at the entrance, sunlight streaming in around him. Home. My family is waiting for me. He stepped out into the warm afternoon air and disappeared down the street. Just another human going about his ordinary life behind him. The news broadcast switched to a story about the reconstruction efforts on New Helsinki. The survivors were returning, rebuilding their homes, planting new crops in fields that had once been burned and barren. It would take years to fully recover from what had happened, but they would recover. Humans always did. That was the truth the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Humanity was not the strongest species in the universe. Not the fastest or the most intelligent or the most technologically advanced, but they endured. They adapted. They learned from every defeat and came back stronger, and they never, ever stopped fighting for the people they loved. The stars continued to shine above Earth. Countless points of light representing countless civilizations. Some of them were watching humanity now, wondering what this strange species would do next. The answer was simple. They would keep growing, keep exploring, keep reaching for the stars. They would make friends where they could and defend themselves where they must. And if anyone ever tried to threaten their homes or their families or their dreams, they would do what they had always done. They would fight. They would sacrifice. They would endure because that was what it meant to be human. The hegemon had called them broken, insane monsters. He'd been wrong about everything except one thing. Humanity was different from every other species in the galaxy. They did not calculate survival the way others did. They valued things beyond their own lives, and that made them the most dangerous species the universe had ever seen. Not because they wanted to conquer or destroy, but because they would pay any price to protect what they loved. The galaxy was learning this lesson now, slowly and painfully. Some would learn it the way the Vectory had, through conflict and defeat. Others would learn it through friendship and alliance, but everyone would learn it eventually because humanity was here to stay. And nothing in the universe would ever change that the sun set over Earth as it had for billions of years, painting the sky in colors that no words could capture. Somewhere, a child looked up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky and dreamed of the worlds beyond. Those worlds were waiting. Those stars were calling, and humanity would answer. They always did.